Hi everyone. A bit dark in here. Any chance that we can sort that out? Turn the power generators on, okay? They'll be okay. We can take it. Yeah, all of them, please. Even the nuclear ones. Honestly, you just can't get the started. Ah! Hello and welcome to another Broken Meeple review. Today is a Euro game that has taken me a while to get acquired and to the table. So I know this might be old news to a few people, but hey, it's a recent one for me. I wanted to try it. I like the original that it's based on. And, you know, I was glad to get it to the table. So what are my thoughts on Manhattan Project Energy Empire? Now I say based on because yes, it shares the title. Yes, it shares that kind of same artwork and style of the previous one, the Manhattan Project. But that's about the only link that there is. Oh, and occasionally you mess around with nuclear power. That's really about the only link you've got. So you do not need to have played the original in order to play this. You do not need to worry about whether you liked or disliked the original before you like this. This is very, very different. In fact, I'm not even sure why they bothered to go with the whole Manhattan Project thing in the first place, apart from maybe just using the same illustration and artwork, but it literally could have just been called Energy Empire, and that would have done, really. Although then, if it had said that, maybe I wouldn't have gone straight for it, because then I would have thought it sounded just like another clone of Power Grid, and I'd have probably run about 20,000 miles in the other direction at that point. So, what do you do in this one? Well, here you've had all the wars have already happened, and you play as one of the nations of the world. So Germany, West Indies, Iraq, Britain, America, that sort of thing. And what you are doing is you are trying to come up with the most prosperous nation, i.e. victory points. What else is it? And you do this by winning favour with the United Nations. You do it by building power plants, which in turn generate energy that allow you to do more actions on your turn. But you also have to take care not to over-pollute the environment. A little bit of pollution is not so bad, but yeah, lay it to waste and you're going to lose a lot of points. You'll build buildings that allow you to do other actions as well as get you victory points. There's quite a few things that you can do in this game, and it's surprised me as to actually there's quite a few routes I can take this, in terms of what do I want to do each turn. But in this, you will take your turns similarly to how a normal worker placement game would go. I say similarly, there's a bit of a catch. You start off with I'll put that there for a sec. You start off with putting your workers on the spaces much like a general worker placement game. Go here to buy a building. Go here to get some money. Go here to recruit a new worker for your team. Except that you can go to a space where you and someone else has gone, except now you have to build a bigger stack of pieces in front of you in order to do so. And by stack, that means extra workers, or I think in this case more like extra power. So generating a lot of power allows you to get past people blocking you from spaces. But the cool thing with this, and I suppose this is the only similarity really that I call to the original Manhattan Project, is that everybody places their workers and takes them off at different times. The original had this. This one's got it as well. Because once you run out of workers, or even before you run out of workers, there is an incentive to in this. And you generate power. And when you do this, you reset all your power, you take all your workers off the board, you roll these cool custom dice that are based on what power stations you built, anything from the safe wind power all the way to the over-polluting radiation nuclear stations. And you roll them, you generate power, and that's your turn. So you'll see workers clog up the spaces, but you'll be able to see that player is going to generate next turn because he has to. Or there's a chance he might. I'll wait, and as soon as he does so, he'll get off my space and then I can go there for much cheaper. So there's a great timing aspect to when you place and when you take off your workers. And it's not just a case of, oh, they'll get out of my space, but it's also your own thinking of, well, do I need the power yet? Do I need to reset some of these actions? Or could I claim some objectives? You know, there are various things you've got to think about with the timing aspect, and that's probably my favourite feature of this game. It doesn't feel like a rigid structure of you go, you go, you go, you go, right, reset the round, you go, you go, you go. No, it doesn't go like that. It's very fluid, very dynamic, and it works really well. The artwork and components themselves are actually pretty, well, I say pretty stellar. The artwork is... it's decent. I mean, the cover looks good, and the art on the buildings now is very much like Manhattan Project. It's okay. I don't think it's like astounding, but it looks fine. It carries the theme quite well. Component quality, though, is very good. I mean, you get some solid wooden pieces for, you know, the like discs and stuff. You get decent looking, you know, decent quality cards for the buildings. You get a nice thick board. You get, you know, actual thick, you know, tiles for your workers and your energy, and you also get actual tokens for the, you know, plastic and iron and various other things that you can get. Although plastic being represented by pink cubes is kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe they could have used... I suppose, what would you actually use instead of a pink cube? You know, come up with a better idea. But, you know, I had to say that I was very pleased with the way that this was packaged. And, you know, it does cost a little bit in order to warrant that component quality. I mean, you know, I can't remember what the actual price of this game is. I'll put it up on the video, you'll be able to see. But, yeah, you get what you paid for in terms of component quality. But, of course, looks aren't everything, as we've already established. But what is it like to play? Well, I've already mentioned the worker placement aspect. That's very solid. Path to victory? There's quite a few ways that you can go. You'll do a bit of everything, but whether you're going to focus on keeping your environment clean, or focus on building a ton of buildings, or, you know, just get all the power dice and then generate tons of power each turn, that's entirely up to you. But what sets it out is that these objective tiles that you can claim. Because what you have is, you have one objective tile at the start of the game, and by objective I kind of mean, like, you know, get 1 point for every $2, get 1 point for every power station, you know, that sort of thing. They're capped, so you can't munchkin them, you need to have a little bit of everything, and you don't even have to aim for the objective tiles. You can actually ignore them and still do well. That's one thing that's really cool. Don't feel that you must get them. I've won games with them. I've lost games with them. You know, it's entirely dependent on what you do with the rest of the game, and there's, you know, various things to do. But the objectives are nice and varied, and you can claim more during the game, so you can kind of set yourself out your own little mini strategy that you're aiming for, based on what's there. You don't see every objective tile in the game. You can also get points for simply just build everything in sight. Why not? They're all worth victory points. If you've got the resources, go build. Build, build, build. And just stack up a ton of points. Keep your environment clean? Well, you'll have intermediate scoring every now and again, which will allow you to score various parts of your environment, the air, the land and the water, based on how clean it is. And you can get quite a bit of points for that if you keep your environment clean. There's quite a fair bit that you can do in this, and enough to, not like, it's not sandbox style, and it certainly isn't like, oh, I could replay this 1,000,000 times and never do the same thing. No, you're going to repeat. But you feel like you've got a decent amount of choice, and you don't have to focus on just one aspect. You could diverge into certain other areas. You could do a bit of everything, you know, completely balanced. And so far, I've seen pretty much all the strategies work quite well. You know, you have to keep an eye on your opponents, but what you do is up to you, and scores have been fairly tight at the end. You know, I've had tiebreaker wins. I've had, like, 5-point radius wins, and I've had the occasional domination, but not something I've dominated, but, you know, I've seen it happen. So, yeah, you get a good amount of variety in the box. If I'm going to mention any flaws, it's probably the time length that is the biggest one. Now, this can play from 1 to 5 players. There's a solo mode in this that's actually pretty good. I like the solo mode in this. It plays out a bit differently from the main game, but not too drastically. You could use it as a decent learning tool, and, you know, you get to do all the variety of things to try and get a certain points level, like most typical Euro games. But it's not difficult to learn, and it plays quite well. I have not played this with 2 players, I'll admit. A lot of the times I don't get to play 2 players, but I think 2 players would be very nice and very speedy, even though you have to put up with the fact that you're using neutral workers to block spaces on the board. Sometimes some people don't like that. But I played this with 3, 4 and 5, and solo. As I said, solo mode, pretty solid. 3, 4 and 5. Free is fantastic. I love playing this with free players because the turns are quick. You still have enough interaction on the board, you know, to have, oh, you took my spot with all that power, how dare you. And the game length isn't too long. It keeps to about, say, 90 minutes with free players pretty well. 4 players, if you know what you're doing, can keep to 90 minutes, but you're kind of looking between 90 minutes and 2 hours at that point. 5 players is not the way I like to play this though, unless everybody has played the game before. If you're teaching new players and you're playing this with 5, be prepared for a long game. And I'm not saying exceedingly long, we're not talking 3 hours here, no. Probably about 2.5 I would say with 5 players, particularly if you're new. But I think the game kind of outstays its welcome after 90 minutes or so. This is a great 90-minute game. 2 hours, okay, I can take 2 hours. You are thinking there's not a huge amount of downtime, you know, you've got to plan ahead. Past 2 hours though, and yeah, I mean, I could think of a lot of Euro games in my collection that I'd rather play for more than 2 hours. So 5 players I'm not as keen on unless people they know what they're doing or can pick up Euros quick. I personally prefer this with 3 and I'm happy with 4, and I definitely think those 2 are the sweet spots. The game scales fine in terms of time length, you know, you get these tokens drain throughout the game that reveal new events, and there's so many of them based on the player count. That's pretty much how it scales. Other than that, you're basically knowing that you're going to have extra competition for the spaces the more players you have. And some people will go crazy for that, so they'll want to play with 4 or 5 on a regular basis. I still think there's plenty enough contention with 3, and 4 is fine for time length as well. So, you know, whatever end of the scale you fall under, you'll probably find that there's a player count that suits you with this. Personally, I prefer the lower end. I'm sure some of you will prefer the higher end. Aside from the time length, there isn't a huge amount to really say as a flaw with this. You get the odd little thing that feels a bit stapled on, like the UN United Nations track. Basically, you'll start off as a different country and you have a variable setup in terms of the resources you start off with. Fantastic, always like that. But you also have a power on your card that does the same thing. It levels you up on this track, but it costs different resources to do it. Again, cool. I have a slightly different ability to yours. But effectively, all you do is move up this little track and whoever's at the top gets points. And you get a certain amount of points depending on where you are. It's, I don't know, when the rest of it feels very thematic and more engaging, you know, like, oh, I've got all this environment space on my board, how am I gonna clean it up? And all the buildings, it's like, oh, they allow me to do more actions if I put workers and energy on them, great. The whole UN track just feels a little bit like tacked on. I mean, it fits the theme, but literally all you do is level up a track and get points. I mean, come on, Stefan Feld does that all the time. I don't want that in my thematic Euros, please. So, stop. But yeah, I mean, that is a minor nitpick. Literally, the only thing I can really fault about the game is the fact that it can go a bit long with 5 players. And again, that might be subjective in your group. But there's certainly a lot more pros than cons here. Looks good. It's got great components. It's got multiple paths to victory. It has variable setups and variable objectives to go for. People get into the theme, you know, they roleplay their nations or they roleplay how they're treating the planet. I mean, the last game I played, I didn't care about pollution. I was just like, you know what, nuclear radiation everywhere. Everybody wants a bit of nuclear radiation. Lost a few points in that aspect, but still managed to, I think, squeak out a win with some other points that I was getting, like with the objective tiles. But yeah, nobody really wanted to come to my, my end of Iraq by the time I was done. Particularly if you wanted to be in the air or on land. I had the perfect water supply, just not the best of air or land. I think I was kind of doing the Spy Who Loved Me James Bond plot of here's my underwater city, by the way I'm going to nuke the planet and then we're all going to live underwater. That seemed like what I was doing, except I was doing it from the perspective of Iraq. I don't know, come up with whatever weird story you want for that. But no, one other thing I do want to mention before I wrap this up. Publishers, we give you a lot of grief about rulebooks, okay? Right? You've heard us talk about this on Facebook, on Twitter, on our reviews. We are keen to have rulebooks that are written well and teach us the game, in a clear, logical manner. And a lot of the times we get, screwed over by rulebooks that just don't work. And this can kill an otherwise fine game. I applaud you, Minion Games. The rulebook in this is one of the best rulebooks I have come across. I am not joking here. There are pictorial examples for pretty much everything you do in this game. It is laid out in a good, logical, step-by-step manner. You have reference cards that illustrate what you do on each turn, whether it's placing workers or generating power, in step order. And it was just a breeze to teach myself how to play this game. I laid it out and I thought, oh god, this rulebook's a bit big, oh god, this is going to take me a while, oh well, let's just go with it. I learned it barely within, 10 minutes? 15 tops? I mean, I was kind of distracted and a bit tired, but yeah, I was tired, and it didn't take me that long to learn the game, and I was already into a solo mode game. When I taught it to other players, there was the odd one or two things that I forgot, but was easily able to find them in the rulebook. It's laid out well, I know exactly where to look. It's got explanations for all the different cards and buildings that have slightly more obscure terminology. But if you want to find out things like the turn sequence, how pollution works, how the events work, they're in this book and they're laid out great. So I applaud you. This is a good rulebook. If you buy this game and you feel like it's going to be a bit, don't be fooled by the fact that the rulebook's a little bit larger. It's laid out great. You will be able to learn this game with very few problems, if any. Trust me on this. So, Energy Empire, or the Manhattan Project, or the Manhattan Project... Ignore the Manhattan Project bit. It's kind of pointless. Just Energy Empire. A solid worker placement Euro game with a twist here and there, and a decent amount of variety and good component quality. It's a great game. Not one that I feel like I want to play every week because of the time length that it can go overboard, and also because as much as there's a decent amount of variety in this, you will see the same sort of buildings pop up because there's only so many different ones. But, generally, I really like this and I think it's a great Euro. So I'm going to give this I'm not going to give it the full 10. I think the time length and certain little mini aspects are a little bit, whatever. But I feel proud to give this one a scorching 9 radiated fish. Yeah, I'm thinking of The Simpsons here. This is a solid Euro and definitely one you should check out if you are a fan of worker placement and you want to have that little bit of an extra twist, like with the whole timing of when you put on and take off workers. It's a solid game and I think it will cater well for every player count depending on your preference, whether you want the lower player counts, a 2-player, solo game, or as many players as you can get for all the extra contention. I think there will be a way of playing this that will suit your needs. And who knows, there could be expansions down the line for this, and if there are, then I'll be keen to check them out. So, that's Energy Empire, and that's it for this review. I'll see you next time, and remember, no matter how much you lay waste to the planet with radiation poisoning and polluted air, it's still only a game at the end of the day, so, we can live easy. See you next time, guys. Take care.